Okay, so out of nowhere, a secret peace plan has just been dropped on the world stage, and it's threatening to completely change the game in Ukraine. But here's the thing, this isn't some proposal up for debate. No, this is an ultimatum, and the clock is ticking. And that, right there, from Ukrainian President Zelensky himself, really says it all. That is the impossible choice at the very heart of this crisis. So, what's it going to be? Dignity or your biggest ally? That's the core dilemma we're going to unpack. All right, first up, this Thanksgiving ultimatum. We're talking about immense pressure, and it's not coming from the battlefield. It's coming from Ukraine's most powerful partner. So here's the deal, and it is a blunt one. Ukraine has until Thanksgiving to accept this 28-point plan. If they don't, they risk the entire pipeline of American military and financial support getting shut off. Gone. President Trump has been pretty clear, saying Zelensky will have to like it, and that this is an appropriate time to get it signed. The pressure is on. Big time. So, you gotta ask, who came up with this thing? Who are the architects of this political earthquake? Well, it's not a team of seasoned diplomats, and that right there is a huge part of this story. The two main guys hammering this out are, well, unconventional, to say the least. For the U.S., you've got Steve Witkoff, a real estate developer and a friend of Donald Trump. For Russia, it's Kirill Dmitriev, who runs a state investment fund. You see their backgrounds? It's business, it's finance, it's not foreign policy. And that right there is so important, because it really explains the whole philosophy behind this plan. It's been shaped by people who see this incredibly complex war as a transaction, a deal that just needs to be closed. And you can see that deal-making DNA all over how this thing was put together. This wasn't something that came out of the State Department. Nope. It was all done in secret. Back-channel talks. Dmitriev, their Russian negotiator, was laser-focused on business interests and getting sanctions lifted. Meanwhile, Witkoff's team reportedly didn't have any deep Russia experts. They were apparently relying on Kremlin translators in meetings. So it's no wonder this whole thing came as a complete shock to America's allies in Europe. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. We've talked about the who and the how, but what exactly is in these 28 points? What is Ukraine actually being told to sign? Now, to really get why this is such a big deal, you need a little context, right? Because this isn't the first time they've tried to hash out a peace plan. There was a draft floating around back in 2022 in Istanbul. So how does this new plan stack up against that one? And wow, when you put them side by side, the difference is just staggering. Back in 2022, the status of occupied land was going to be negotiated later. This new plan, it demands that the world recognize Crimea, Luhansk, and Donetsk as Russian territory. Full stop. It even forces Ukraine to pull back from parts of Donetsk it still holds. And in exchange for these really vague US-only security guarantees, Russia gets all sanctions lifted over time. You can see it's not a compromise at all. It's basically an escalation of what Moscow was asking for, but now it's being presented as an American-backed plan. So let's break down what Ukraine is being asked to give up. And it is a lot. First, a huge chunk of its sovereign territory. We're talking cities they have fought and bled for. Then, permanent limits on its own decisions, like writing a ban on joining NATO into its constitution. That door would be closed forever. The plan also puts a hard cap on its army. And get this, in a final twist that really shows you the business deal nature of this thing, Ukraine would actually have to pay the US for those vague security guarantees. Okay, so that's one side of the ledger. What does Russia get? Well, pretty much the whole store. Its invasion is effectively legitimized on the world stage. Those crippling economic sanctions, they go away. It gets a path back to doing business as usual, and it even gets to use its frozen assets for so-called reconstruction. It is, by any measure, a massive strategic win for Moscow. So when you lay it all out like that, you can see why the reactions have been so intense. It all boils down to one question, really. Is this a peace deal, or is it a surrender? From Moscow's perspective, this is a perfectly reasonable starting point. Vladimir Putin has come out and endorsed it, calling it a realistic way to end the war. The argument from the Kremlin is basically that Kyiv and its allies just need to accept the reality on the ground. But a lot of Western experts see it, well, completely differently. Analysts over at Chatham House are calling it an effective demand for capitulation. Their take is that this plan just takes everything Russia wanted from the start and repackages it as a US proposal. They're literally calling it the brainchild of the Kremlin. And this really gets to the heart of the problem, a classic issue in international relations called the commitment problem. See, Ukraine is being asked to make these huge, irreversible concessions, giving up land, military options, alliances, forever. And in return, they get promises. Promises that, let's be honest, could be broken. You have to ask, once Ukraine makes these changes it can never take back, what actually guarantees Russia will hold up its end of the bargain? All right, let's zoom out a bit, because the shockwaves from this ultimatum are being felt all over the world, especially among key U.S. allies. The consequences go way beyond Ukraine's borders. Yeah, European leaders are in a really, really tough spot here. Publicly, they're trying to be diplomatic, calling the plan a basis for talks that needs additional work. But behind the scenes, they are absolutely scrambling. We're talking urgent meetings in London, Paris, Berlin. Their biggest fear is that this move by the U.S. completely undermines transatlantic unity, not to mention that fundamental principle that there should be nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. And this, right here, is the long-term danger that has so many people worried. This isn't just about Ukraine. If a country can invade its neighbor, seize territory by force, and then have that aggression legitimized by a superpower, well, that shatters the whole foundation of international law. It tells aggressors everywhere that might makes right. Think about it. What message does that send to any other country with its eye on a neighbor's territory? And so, that's where we're left, with this one huge, looming question. Is this 28-point plan a bitter but necessary pill to swallow to finally end a brutal war? Or is it a deal that buys a temporary, fragile peace by rewarding aggression and setting a deeply dangerous precedent for the future? A pragmatic path to peace or a green light for future wars? The choice Ukraine is forced to make could define global security for years to come.